My name is Nicholas Aiello, and for my organizational behavior in the news presentation, I took a deeper look into the NFL and kneeling for the anthem. Kneeling for the anthem was an issue that started back in 2017 as a way to peacefully protest the injustices against black people and minorities in America. Colin Kaepernick is the face behind the issue, as he was the first to sit down during the national anthem on August 26th in a preseason game against the Packers. People immediately took notice and posted pictures on social media as questions began to circulate as to why. Kaepernick answered those questions by saying, quote, "I am not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color. To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way. There are bodies in the street and people getting paid leave and getting away with murder." After this, President Trump added fuel to the fire with a series of tweets calling for NFL players to stop disrespecting the flag and the military. Kaepernick was approached by a teammate and former United States Army Green Beret, Nate Boyer, and the two came to a mutual agreement that kneeling, rather than sitting, was an appropriate middle ground for Kaepernick to fight for what he believes in without disrespecting the flag and what it stands for. After Trump successfully divided fans in the NFL came to a decision to ban kneeling during the anthem prior to the 2018 season. Things started to quiet down when Kaepernick was cut from the 49ers, and the following years were pretty status quo. George Floyd was murdered in 2020, and the NFL decided to go back on their statements and revoke their new kneeling rule, and they ramped up significantly their peaceful protest efforts. In 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, massive protests sparked across the country and in the NFL. In early June of this year, the league issued a formal statement essentially apologizing for banning kneeling and backtracked on their stance from 2 years prior, admitting they made a mistake and confirming that they will side with the players rather than the president this time around. They even pledged $250 million towards fighting injustices as part of their Inspire Change movement. In this presentation, we will take a look at how Donald Trump got exactly what he wanted from the NFL, the organizational culture within the NFL, and how diversity and inclusion in the NFL is reflected and represented by the issue of kneeling. As President of the United States, Donald Trump not only possesses positional power, but personal power as well. Personal power can come in the form of expert power and referent power. While Trump didn't have expert power when it came to the military or flag, he certainly had referent power. Defined as someone who possesses admired personality, charisma, and reputation, a person with referent power can basically be summed up as a likable individual. His supporters are supporters for one reason or another, but when it comes down to it, his base tends to agree with whatever he has to say. He holds referent power over these people and can get them to stop viewing NFL games with a single tweet. As a president, Trump also holds legitimate power. Unfortunately for him, the NFL is a privately owned business, and he can't legally force them to do whatever he wants, but he can coerce them. Coercive power is defined as the threat and use of punishment, harm, or unpleasant consequences, or, in other words, they can make life very difficult for you unless you do what they want. Trump honed into his coercive power through his referent power. The NFL is a business first and foremost, and if there is somebody out there, particularly the President of the United States, who is causing your business to lose customers, aka the fans, then the business will give in. In this case, NFL viewership had declined nearly 13% from the previous year. This caused the NFL to give in to Trump's coercive power and create a new rule stating that teams can be fined if their players are on the field during the national anthem and do not stand and show respect for the flag. The move to ban kneeling amongst players was an effective one, but it could be argued that it was ethically wrong. Refusing to allow players to use their own platform as a form of protest proved to be the wrong move less than 2 years later when Floyd was murdered. The initial mishandling of the situation brought to light the NFL's organizational culture issues and that they value making money over their employees. Something to examine relating to this is Pfeffer's argument. Pfeffer's argument was organizations that put their employees first are more successful and have a sustained competitive advantage. This can be easily applied here as that's exactly what the NFL didn't do back in 2017. They refused to put their employees first in favor of increasing profits. Fans didn't like to tune into their teams using the field as a political tool, so some fans stopped tuning in, leading to the banning of kneeling. Luckily for the NFL, Pfeffer's argument didn't hold too much weight, as they have a large competitive advantage in the form of being the single highest earning professional sport in the country. However, the conflict still spoke to a larger organizational culture issue, as it was clear the NFL didn't have its employees' interests as its primary motivating factor. On a smaller scale, in the NBA, Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban came out and publicly defended his players' right to protest and was rewarded with an outpouring of support. This goes to show how critical top management is for an organization's success, and how the heads of companies oftentimes are the driving factor of what the culture is within an organization. One team in the NFL who had weak top management was the Houston Texans. After the initial protests back in 2017, and after the new rules came out preventing kneeling, Bob McNair, the owner of the Texans, said on record, "We can't have the inmates running the prison." This was in reference to the players protesting and contributing to the NFL's decline in viewership. Coming from a wealthy, older white man speaking about the black athletes who worked for him, this comment was tone deaf given the landscape of the situation. The NFL Owners Club, to give a little bit of a background, is a very exclusive white man's club with only one minority owner who is of Pakistani descent and two female owners across the entire 32-team league. With McNair making this statement in reference to kneeling, it begged the question, is there an implicit bias or is there explicit discrimination within the NFL and their ownership club? Explicit discrimination is defined as conscious acts by individuals to treat a specific group differently from another, attitudes and beliefs endorsed at a conscious level, while implicit bias is defined as some subconscious, subtly, often unintentional acts that favor some groups over others. It operates below conscious awareness. The McNair case is difficult as he has apologized and claims that he was using a common expression, not literally referring to the players as inmates. Still, the willingness to say something along those lines during a sensitive time for black people in America speaks to the fact that there is certainly a diversity issue amongst the higher ranks of the NFL. Ideally, it is implicit bias and McNair didn't realize what he was doing, but the fact remains that there shouldn't be that bias in the first place, especially in an industry as diverse as the NFL. With these issues that sprouted up in 2017 and continued in 2020, there are multiple different things the NFL as an organization can attempt to rectify the situation. First and foremost, admit to their mistakes. Not only did the NFL do this when they publicly admitted they were wrong, but individual players did it as well. Drew Brees, a popular quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, came out earlier this year and maintained that he didn't support anybody kneeling for the flag. After an enormous amount of backlash, Drew Brees admitted his mistake and apologized for not fully understanding the situation. By admitting mistakes and admitting that kneeling was never about the flag, the NFL managed to stand up to Donald Trump and rendered him powerless over their situation. The NFL needs to continue the fight against injustices and allow their players to use it as a platform as they see fit. Not only does this stand up to Trump's coercive power, but it also solves cultural issues within the organization of the NFL. It appeals to Pfeffer's argument to put your employees first in order to gain a competitive advantage, which, as mentioned earlier, is exactly what Mark Cuban did with the Dallas Mavericks. He publicly reprimanded those who thought kneeling was inappropriate and vehemently stood by his players' side, putting his employees above everything, including losing money. One recommendation I have to fight the implicit biases and diversity issues within the NFL is to enforce a mandated implicit association test. This mandated implicit association test will be taken by all NFL employees upon entry to the league. The test can reveal if there is a subconscious bias amongst NFL employees, specifically ownership. While there are a lot of drawbacks with the IAT, such as how valid it is, it wouldn't be used as a determinant on whether or not someone got a job and got hired, but rather it could be used as a data collector and help organizations to make data-driven decisions when hiring or installing training. Which brings me to my next point, and that is to have specific training measurements to help fight against implicit bias. Unfortunately, studies have found limited effects on whether training affects implicit bias, but it is certainly a starting point. Ultimately, implicit bias is something that needs to be flushed out over time, and hopefully, with this latest round of protests, people around the country can start doing their part and inspire change. And these are the references that I used in my project. Thank you for viewing my presentation.